Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of RC Retirement. Today I would like to start out by admittedly leaning on some past laurels, a search for seemingly lost retirees. On top of that, however, I want to describe my plan, with your help, to expand upon this project and hopefully improve the lives of many more people out there. So please stick with me until the end of this episode for a description of that expansion. I described in episode 23 on my channel about a search for retirees, which I had dubbed the Fettinger Project. I'll cover a little bit about the history of that project right now. The basis of the project was an experience with a widow, Mrs. Kathleen Fettinger, who had given me, who by the way has given me permission to use her name and story if it will assist other retirees out there. Anyway, Mrs. Fettinger had lost her husband due to a prolonged illness. Mrs. Fettinger's husband had been eligible for retired pay and benefits, but due to his illness had forgotten, due to life itself, to apply for those benefits. Mr. Fettinger passed away at age 62, and 2 years later, Mrs. Fettinger's friends suggested she approach the Michigan National Guard to inquire what benefits her husband may have left behind. The Survivor Outreach Coordinator, Mr. Fraser Thompson, or that's what I called him back then in episode 23. I hope he doesn't mind my using his real name. And the reason for that is I'm posting some documents with this episode and his real name is on it. I've redacted a few others, but I don't think that Mr. Tom Foster, who is a retired sergeant major and an excellent survivor outreach coordinator, he's helped many people throughout his career. Excuse me. Anyway, Mrs. Fettinger approached Sergeant Major Foster, who was assigned to the family programs section at the time, and also retirement services, which consisted of myself and my assistant. We were also assigned to family programs when this all began. So Mr. Foster's desk was located about 30-40 feet away from my own. And after a brief conversation with Mrs. Fettinger, he asked me to come over to meet her. During that time frame, I was receiving assistance from a small group of people from the Michigan State Defense Force in retirement services, and that particular day, one of them, Captain James Jones, was there that day, and I brought him over to meet Mrs. Fettinger as well. Scroll down on my notes here. We listened to Mrs. Fettinger's story, and quite frankly, we were aghast at her circumstances. As a result of her husband's medical bills, she had declared bankruptcy to get some relief. She was also without a whole lot of income. She was able to get by, but she wasn't able to didn't have a lot of flexibility, we'll say that. And she also was lacking in any meaningful healthcare coverage. A review of her husband's record showed that he was retirement eligible, but there were errors in the record. I won't go into what they all were, but there were a few, which would have caused difficulty if not corrected. We were still able, though, to accurately estimate what his retired pay would have been and what the survivor benefit would be. It was a small amount, just under $300, pardon me, just under $300 per month. But remember, the TRICARE benefit also goes with that, and that's of significant value also. The news of the survivor benefit brought Mrs. Fettinger to tears. That humble sum would have been sufficient, had she known of it and been receiving it back then, to keep her out of bankruptcy. She asked if it was still possible to obtain this annuity. I assured her that with a few administrative corrections that I could initiate, she would be eligible. The difficulty, I warned her, would be that Army Human Resources Command would, by policy, refuse her first request for retired pay and the survivor annuity. This is simply because of how long it had been since her husband's death and the fact that he was not already in receipt of retired pay when he passed. I was positive, however, that the decision would be in her favor. So Mrs. Fettinger sat with Captain Jones and I as we prepared all of the various documents that would be needed for the survivor benefit request and the necessary appeal to ABCMR, the Army Board for Corrections of Military Records. The only missing item would be the ABCMR request denial, and I said that would be critical, not the ABCMR request, the denial from Human Resources Command. Mrs. Fettinger promised that she would supply this as soon as it arrived. And we then sent the pay request for her and she left. That's not the end of the story though. Afterward, Captain Jones and I sat marveling about Mrs. Fettinger's situation and the sadness of it. We were glad we were able to provide some small measure of support for her, of course, but as we continued to discuss it, we began to wonder how many other people were beyond the age of 60 and not receiving retired pay, just floating around out there without knowledge of their eligibility or proper support. We decided some active measures had to be taken to correct this situation, not just in memory of Mrs. Fettinger's husband, but for the benefit of those lost retirees. After Captain Jones left for the day, I queried the retirement points database for a list of all National Guardsmen in that state who had 15 or more years of qualifying service. I then, in addition to my normal task, spent several late nights, going through records and double-checking the DFAS retired pay system to find out who was eligible for retired pay but had not yet applied. I went 10 years back. That was about as far as I figured I would be able to find relevant data, and came up with a list of 45 names of people who were not receiving retired pay. I then collected the best contact information I could, phone numbers, email addresses, physical addresses, whatever I could. Lastly, I gathered selected documents from their records to support the retired pay application and ran calculations of what their retired pay would be and, more invitingly, what the back pay would be. I am guessing it was 2 or 3 weeks since meeting Mrs. Fettinger for the first time, maybe longer, it's hard to remember at this point, when I finally presented my results to Captain Jones and Mr. Foster. He was amazed at the findings. We discussed the possibilities of finding these people. We also contacted Mrs. Fettinger and asked if we might name our new tasking the Fettinger Project. She heartily agreed, naturally, and gave permission to use her name and her story in any way that might help retirees, as I said a while ago. Since we began the Fettinger Project, this was back in 2014, since we began the project, 3 names have been added to that original list due to various circumstances, bringing the total to 48, and 46 of those individuals have been located. Actually, it's 47, but one of them is in prison for life, and after a lot of trying, we were unable to get his pay started. So that brings it down to 1. That last person, and I'm going to say his real name on the air because I'm hoping someone out there might know where he is. That last person, Staff Sergeant Bill Dexter Wild Bill Lanning, has not been found. He's over 70 at this point. My efforts to determine his location is another story for another time. I did hear, however, and I have not been able to confirm this, that he is living somewhere as a hermit in the woods of North Carolina. That is the best info I have on him. I was personally able to assist 18 of these people over a 3-year period, and due to the incredible efforts of the Michigan State Defense Force, the other 28 people who have been located were assisted and are now receiving retired pay due to that support. These people are now receiving over $41,000 a month in monthly retired pay, and have received over $1.4 million in back pay. That is truly incredible. I would like now to give you a few stories of some of these retirees who received help from us. I've selected 3, and I think this will be not only informative, but in some ways entertaining, refreshing, just a good news story. And they're all very short. I'm going to read them from the perspective of the retirement services officer who assisted them. And just for your info, in the show notes, I'm going to put a longer list of success stories from this project. So check the show notes. Number 1, Colonel Demps. I'm not going to give full names here. Colonel Demps. His retired pay eligibility date was 6 May 2012, and the meeting with him was 15 April 2014. In 2014, I started attempting to track down Colonel Demps. I used many means to get a good address and phone number. I was able to obtain his work phone number, and I called him. I introduced myself and informed him that he had a military retirement and back pay coming. His reply was, "Let me talk to my wife and I will get back to you." I waited about 3 weeks and I called him again but could not reach him. I called day after day for about a week. I then was able to get his home phone number. I called and spoke to his wife. I could not release the amount of back pay, but did let her know that he had an amount due him. She made the appointment for later that week at the Light Guard Armory in Detroit. I met both of them and completed his retirement paperwork. I asked him why he never applied for his pay. This was his story. When I turned 60 years old, I took a day off from work and went to 2 federal buildings, an armory, and a state office. None of those places could help me. I gave up. Then you talked to my wife and offered to meet us here and do all the work. Here I am. The whole meeting took about 20 minutes, and he received about $101,846 in back pay and $3,516 per month. They both thanked me several times and left with a smile. And that was by Captain James Jones of the State Defense Force. Here's one that I did myself. This is Chief Warrant Officer Force South. His retired pay eligibility date was 15 August 2007, and I met him on 10 July 2014. Chief South was one of the most difficult people on our list to track down and, once he was found, to meet. He had lost his flight status as an issue of, or as a result of deployment-related medical issues, which, by his own admission, crushed him. Compounding the issue further, he lost his wife soon after retiring and stated that applying for his retired pay, quote, just didn't seem to matter anymore, unquote. Upon learning of his status, a multitude of people, both retired and currently serving, started to appear from the woodwork to encourage him to meet with me. I even joked while on the phone with, pardon me, hiccups. I even joked one time on the phone with him that I would camp out in his front lawn until he agreed to meet with me. Finally, a pilot from the Grand Ledge Armory met him at his home, put him in his car, and drove him to Lansing. I met Chief South in the lobby of our building. With me was Command Sergeant Major Husband, one of the people with whom Chief South had previously served. Upon seeing Sergeant Major Husband, Chief South instantly brightened and they embraced warmly. His mood was decidedly better immediately. Chief South remained quiet as we completed his application, though. After everything was signed, he commented on my uniform and how the one he had worn, one designed specifically for pilots, was quite different. I mentioned that one of my co-workers, CW2 Hachu, not Achu, Hachu, wore the same type of uniform he was describing. Chief South brightened again and asked what type of helicopter Chief Hachu flew. I offered to introduce them and to ask that question directly. Back in his element, Chief South happily met with Chief Hachu and they reminisced about the joys of flying. Chief South left the building with a contented smile on his face. Later on, he began to receive $2,424 per month in retired pay, and soon after that, received over $148,000 in back pay. I've got one more, and then I get to a few other interesting details. This is Sergeant Daggs. His retired pay eligibility date was 19 October 2012, and the RSO met with him on 6 September 2014. Sergeant Daggs was about 2 years overdue for filing for retired pay. If I recall correctly, his reason for the delay was due to the frustration of not knowing the process and then not being able to find anyone to help. See a pattern here for some of these folks? I do not think he ever contacted anyone at Michigan Joint Force Headquarters directly. He now lives in Ohio and commutes to Bay City to work during the week. Because of his erratic schedule, it was difficult to nail down a time and place for our meeting. What we finally did was fill out much of the paperwork over the phone. I then met him at a rest stop on US 23 on a Saturday morning, a rest stop that he passes on his way to Bay City. We sat at a picnic table and I had him sign the required forms. He was blown away by our flexibility to accommodate his needs. He was also very happy to know he had almost $20,000 in back pay due to him. Now, I've got a postscript to this one. Sergeant Daggs passed away about 16 months later, and as a result of having already applied for retired pay, his spouse was able to receive a survivor annuity based on his pay. And that was by Warrant Officer 1 Moylanen, also of the State Defense Force. All right, folks, hold on. I'm almost done here. I've got the best part coming up. So as a follow-up to Mrs. Fettinger's ABCMR request, it was fully approved, and she received all of the retired pay her husband would have received and the survivor annuity on top of that. And then another nice benefit is she was also covered by TRICARE. She wrote a letter to the Governor of Michigan, the Adjutant General of Michigan, and copied Captain Jones, Mr. Foster, and myself, and all of our supervisors, thanking us for our support to her and to the other lost retirees and survivors. I'm including a copy of that letter, her ABCMR decision, and some other notes about the project itself in the show notes. Well, anyway, now you have a good idea of the Fettinger Project and its results. I would like now to tell you what I am wanting to do. I want to expand the concept of this project beyond the borders of the state in which it originated. I want to find lost retirees all across the country and help them begin to receive the benefits they've earned. The big question, though, is how to find these people in order to assist them, and that is where I need your help. I'll give you some tips on how to identify someone who is a likely candidate for this assistance. I admit that some of these people may not actually be eligible for retirement benefits, but you've got to examine each situation and figure that out individually. You can't just make a blanket statement. So here are my tips. People possibly eligible for retired pay and benefits will likely have some or all of the following attributes. And I've got 4. 1, at, over, or nearing the age of 60. 2, let me do it this way, since just in case someone from Britain or Australia is watching, because this means something else. 2, served at least 15 qualifying years in the military and were separated from a reserve component before reaching 20 years. Remember that some people can be separated from service for medical disqualification and not have reached 20 years, but if they have at least 15, they're retirement eligible. Now, don't limit it to just less than 20. We want the over 20s as well. Are eligible for retired pay but never applied for it because they are receiving VA compensation. They may have left service before concurrent retired and disability pay came into law and think that VA compensation is their only choice. I'm going to hurry now because the battery is about to go on me. May claim ineligibility for retirement benefits for a variety of reasons. If you know someone who may meet these criteria, either contact me or have that person contact me. My email address is dj@rcretirement.com. While I am putting a link, or while trying to assist these people, I will need to see some of their records, so I'm going to put another link in the show notes to the contact information for the various National Guard archived records sections. This page also has information on how to request records from the different service branches and the National Archives. Please either direct the potential retiree to this page, assist with a records request yourself, or have the person contact me for assistance. Now, a little bit of upfront information, just for full disclosure. Yes, I will be charging a fee from the retiree for these services, but for everyone in this particular category, I will do so on a contingency basis. I will not charge them any fees until they have started receiving their retired pay and their back pay. I will then send an invoice for a percentage of the back pay. Before any of this happens, though, I will assist with the necessary records requests, records corrections, the application for retired pay, and if necessary, survivor benefit applications with the spouse of that retiree. This means naturally I need to also hear from survivors of potential retirees, because they are a category that needs assistance as well. Now, obviously this has been a somewhat long episode, not the longest I've ever done, but somewhat long. I believe, though, one chock full of great information. So I do ask that you share this episode with others so that they can learn of this project and benefit from it, hopefully. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the like button for this episode. Share it and spread it around. Let everyone know about this. Alright, so that's enough for one day. I do thank you for your time and look forward to the next time we can communicate. Whatever your branch of service in the military, thank you for your service. Have a great day.
If you liked what you heard on today's episode, then please go below and give it a thumbs up. and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Also, please let other people know about this channel and the information it can provide for them. If you have questions or comments, then please have no qualms about posting them in the comments section below. Please remember the RC Retirement YouTube channel and the RC Retirement website are not recognized or endorsed by the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs, or any other government agency. The information presented in these resources are for entertainment and informational purposes only. Also, the content of either of these resources should not be considered financial or legal advice. Please consult with your own legal counsel, accountant, or financial planner before making any decisions based on what you have learned here. As always, thank you for watching the RC Retirement YouTube channel.